Good afternoon, or is it evening, depending on where you're watching from. Chris Warden.
Caleb Stevens.
Andy Jones-Wilkins.
And we are here to talk about the biggest race on our calendar on the live streams in terms of the time it takes, the eyes it gathers, and that is Cocodona, the Cocodona 250, presented by Air Viper Running on the Mountain Outpost YouTube channel. I am so excited about this race. It swallows up a week and change of my time every year. And one of the cool things about this race is just the lead up to it and the talking about it. And one of the things about this race is the fact that we're having a little bit of a transition this year, and we'll have to go into that. So Caleb, you're going to be part of our broadcast team this year. So talk about your experience with Cocodona.
Yeah, I had the chance to run Cocodona last year, and it was just life-changing. It's one of those where you talk about the media, the lead up to it. I mean, I had the benefit of watching that for a few years and just getting totally absorbed in the content that was coming out of it, hearing the stories of runners both at the start of the pack and at the back of the pack. All the stories are equally as beautiful, right? And to be able to experience that last year, to navigate that course, to not get enough sleep, to feel it, right? To realize just how quickly you go from the highest of highs to the lowest of lows, all in the exact same race and maybe within the span of 10 minutes. It was just unlike anything I'd ever experienced before. And the beauty that I had seen while watching you guys call the race year after year, to then be able to see it through my own eyes on the course, I mean, it blew me away. And it was even better than I expected, having been such a big fan for a number of years.
That's awesome. Yeah. And then, of course, conversely, we have a guy who's usually in the booth with me stepping out onto the course, Andy Jones-Wilkins.
Yeah, I know, Chris. I know you're going to miss me. But after a couple of years in the booth, I think I've kind of felt moved almost to jump into this race. And my original plan was to do the 125 this year and the 250 next year, but I figured what the heck, and I'll talk a little bit more about this later. The time is right now for the Cocodona 250. So I'm looking forward to seeing it after watching it on our laptops and late into the night and commentating on it. I'm looking forward to actually experiencing it, and as somebody who's run a lot of ultra marathons, I've never run an ultra marathon over 103 miles. So I'm really going into uncharted territory, and a lot of my emotions and feelings that I'm experiencing here on Friday night before the race is like, I feel like a newbie runner again, someone who's justifiably accused of being sort of a old school curmudgeon is sitting here like, what do I do? How do I charge all these devices? What's with this heavy pack and these poles and all this new gear I have to carry? And it's really fun and exciting to be in that place. But I also hope, quite frankly, to finish early enough to come into the booth maybe for the last few hours and help you guys call in those final finishers, on Saturday morning, because I don't think there's anything quite like that in the sport. We love Western States golden hours, but I have to say on the Mount Rushmore of golden hours, Cocodona's is right up there.
Absolutely. And we'll circle back around to this whole switching, trading places thing, because I have an idea, and we haven't talked to Caleb about this yet, so we're going to spring it on him in a little bit. But pivoting from there, let's talk about the course. Actually, and also, if you have any questions in the YouTube, on YouTube, just feel free to pop them in the chat, and we'll do our best to try and circle around and talk about those questions and maybe answer some things that people are wondering about with this race. Of course, there's not only 1, 2, 3, but 4 events taking place this week. But our focus is going to primarily be on the 250 itself. So, Jordan, if we could just pull up the course map here that I've got here on our screen here. All right. I guess we can just start by talking about what happens at the very start of this race. So the start of the race is actually at Deep Canyon Ranch, which for those who have run Black Canyon, that's where your 50K finishes and your halfway point of the 100K. AJW, I know that you have gone and done training runs from Deep Canyon Ranch, and Caleb, you also ran the race last year as this is your starting line. Can you two talk about what happens in the first 37 miles of this race?
I'll start here because I'm the one doing the race this year. Caleb experienced it last year, but in all my experiences running ultras and long races, I've never run a race where the absolute hardest part is right at the beginning. I've run Western States where the hardest part is in the canyons, and I've run Hard Rock where the hardest part's in the middle, and I've run Wasatch where the hardest part is at the end. But literally, the hardest part is from about mile 5 to about mile 32. The vertical is about 10,000 feet. The conditions are very difficult. In an ordinary year, it's quite hot. There's a lot of rocks. It's the Bradshaw Mountains. There's not a lot of shade. And because of limited access, there's also a significant distance, 15 miles between your ability to get water. And those things all mixed up together, combined with the fact that it comes right at the beginning, everyone's tapered up, they're excited, they're probably going to go out too hard, I think spells doom for a lot of people. And so the start to Crown King, it's amazing to think of the crux of the race being so early. But I was with a guy in the training run back in April, and he basically said, in any given year, you kind of have to be in survival mode on day 1. And you kind of train your way into day 3 and day 4. And by the time you're up on the Coconino Plateau, you're like, all right, now this is going on. So I really, really do think that first 37 miles is something to behold. I think every ultra runner should experience it. This year, fortunately, we won't have quite as high temperatures as we normally do. It'll still be every bit as difficult, though.
Caleb, what was your experience like there last year?
Yeah, that first section is almost like the wardrobe on Narnia. Like you enter through that and you realize I'm in it, right? You get through that first section and you're just, and you know that you're in for this like incredibly epic journey for the rest of the week. And it's beautiful, super challenging, as AJW said, but it's just one of those things where it's like a rite of passage that once you get through that, and if you're smart enough, and if you don't burn your legs up on those big climbs, if you don't push too hard, the back half of the race, if you still have legs, you can run, right? So you have to get through that first day. You have to get through that first section. And if you can do that and manage yourself and pull those emotions back, pull that adrenaline back a little bit and realize that you're in it for 250 miles, not 35, right? You're going to set yourself up well. This year, I think you do have the benefit, though, to AJW's point of the cooler weather. That's going to help a lot. Last year, pretty hot. I think historically every year it's been pretty hot in that section, carrying a lot of water, a lot of extra weight. So this year, I think temps are going to be high of 70. It's going to be really interesting to see how folks attack that section in the big climbs, and especially the front leaders, if they're going to really push that even harder than you would typically see.
And Chris, I would encourage viewers to take a look at people as they arrive in Crown King, because in 2023, when I was volunteering up at Crown King, there were clearly 2 categories: people who just looked like they saw a dead body and they were ready to quit before it was even dark on the first night, and people who were like, thank God I'm here at Crown King. It's game on now. Go in, get some food, get your warm clothes for the night session. Like you can really see it almost in the eyes of the people as they cross that bridge and roll into Crown King, where they're all going to take a little time to regroup. But there's 2 categories of regroupers. And the ones who are going to just be like, oh, that's so great. I'm done with that. Here we go. Let's get on to Whiskey Row. Are we going to be the ones to watch for later in the race?
Yeah, that's one of the cool things about the fact that you volunteered out there in 2023. I remember we interviewed you because you were on the road that year, and your reaction when we asked about what you saw was not one we expected, because you kind of led into it. You're like, man, I've never seen so many runners look so terrible. And we're like, wait, what? I said, yeah, you said that climb to Crown King, with it being an especially hot year that year, really took some people out of their rhythm very early on. Now, what's going to be interesting about this year's race is that there's kind of been some whisper on the online channels and in various discussion groups and message boards that normally it's going to be a very warm race, but there are people talking about packing puffies for their Crown King drop back. Because that Crown King to Whiskey Row section is potentially going to be a bit chilly. What are you seeing, and what are you talking to with people that are going to be out there?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a desert dog, and I'm way more worried about that section and staying warm than I am about staying cool in the first section. I mean, by all accounts, and Jamil sent something out to the internet, a couple days ago. By all accounts, it's going to be in the low 30s, maybe even upper 20s along Senator Highway and up the climb up Mount Union. By the way, don't sleep on the climb up Mount Union. It's a 3-mile single track climb. It then spills out on a fire road, makes a left-hand turn, and takes you into Camp Kippa. I guarantee you, I would love to talk to some volunteers at Camp Kippa after this is all said and done, because there's going to be some cold people rolling in there. But that gets up to almost 6,900 feet. Mount Union is one of the highest peaks in the Bradshaws. There's going to be wind sweeping across there. It's that dry cold that we usually love here in the desert. But I would say, yes, I'm probably, Chris, going to leave Crown King with more weight in clothing than I had in water getting to Crown King.
Caleb, did you leave Crown King during the daylight still, or were you basically having to prepare for a cold overnight when you left there last year?
Yeah, it was daylight, and I was kind of in that mixed camp. I was super excited to be there because I just knew what it symbolized, right? Is such a big fan of it. It was like, man, you just got through that incredibly tough section. Maybe I was a little too excited. You come out of it and you're like, well, the hardest part's over. And you're like, actually, no, you still have 220 miles, right? So like, you got to manage that a little bit. But yeah, I was kind of in that middle camp.
So kind of checking and cheating, I can see that we're at about a 50% chance of rain for the first 2 days of this race up in Prescott, Whiskey Row, Dells area.
Dude, I saw that just flared up today, and I thought of, so let's take somebody, the vast majority of the folks who might be on, say, 100-hour pace at this race, they're going to be rolling into, Whiskey Row maybe at dawn, and it could be actually raining, maybe even sleeting a little bit if it's like 36, 37 degrees. So I know we're going to talk about the front of the pack in the middle in the rest of this, pre-show, but that's going to be interesting. If you think of taking 24 to 26 hours to get to Whiskey Row, and then you sort of get your wits about you. Maybe you sleep, maybe you don't. Maybe you forge on the Fane Ranch to sleep. Man, with a chance of rain, it could even, And let's face it, that wet, cold rain hits different.
But that's the interesting thing on the field, right? Because you have so many folks that are from here that aren't used to that, who usually benefit from that intense heat. Right? Yeah. And they benefit from those conditions. But then you have all these folks that are coming in from the East Coast or from up in the Seattle area or different places who are used to that. And that's what they thrive in and they train in. And how much is that going to benefit runners that are more used to a climate like that or those cooler temperatures?
Yeah, they're going to be like, this is just like back in Pennsylvania.
Yeah. I think for some of the people who have been nervous about their heat training, they're probably actually breathing a sigh of relief. Whereas conversely, people like you and some of the people you trained with over the last couple months are probably like, man, this is going to add a little bit of a degree of difficulty that I had not anticipated.
Right.
So
I think too, talking to Andre Lee, a multiple time finisher here, he believes really strongly that people shouldn't overlook, as justifiably so, the attention is paid to the start to Crown King. Don't sleep on Crown King to Whiskey Row. You no pacers allowed. I mean, yes, you do get Camp Kippa and Camp W, but you still have a lot of climbing. The Senator Highway can be long and lonely, and it's frankly, it's really not a highway. It's a tricky section, and you need to take care of yourself in there. Arastra Gulch can suck you in. There's like a fire going, and you're sort of enjoying being warm again. I think people need to be careful there as well.
Mm-hmm. So once runners leave Whiskey Row, they will be heading out on a stretch that has a little bit more of a, I guess, closer chunks. Because when you get up, I look at the first 80 miles of this race as like two. Like there's a clear division at Crown King, but after you leave Whiskey Row, you've got the Fane Ranch, Mingus Mountain, Jerome, Dead Horse / Cottonwood, and then basically making your way from west to east up to Sedona, which is about a 80-mile stretch. But rather than the first 80 miles being cut into two, it's more cut into four. Caleb, can you describe what it's like for runners basically hitting that stretch when they come across from Whiskey Row up to Sedona?
Yeah, so last year, right around Camp Kippa, I took a wrong turn. And so that's the part that stands out there for me. I got the dreaded text message of "you are off course."
Also,
And
to interject.
talk about that.
yeah.
So for those that wonder, and we have obviously the runner tracking is all over the, and we'll have it pinned to the live stream, but and people will follow this tracker religiously, and you will find this out over the course of the week, because if somebody's tracker comes 1/1,000,000th of an inch off of the course, oh yeah,
They'll be on the text like, "Oh,
Yeah,
Browning's lost."
So yeah, explain what happened there.
Yeah, again, a little overzealous at the start of this thing, just so excited, and I got to this turn that I just made the turn, and it was all downhill. And I thought, my legs feel better than they have ever felt, and I'm going to crush this downhill. And I did. And I got to the bottom of it, and it was probably about a 2.5-mile stretch. And I look at my phone, and one of my buddies actually had also texted me that said, "You're doing so great," almost like a question mark. I'm like, this seems weird what he's saying to me. And I look, and I'm like, oh, there's the text tells me I'm off course.
Oh no.
So I had to go back up this hill after feeling like I'm just this superhuman athlete running down this thing, and now I'm hiking back up the hill right before Camp Kippa, and so that was a little bit of a challenge. That's the one section that I really remember. And then I just remember sitting in there trying to warm up and regroup, knowing that, like, hey, I got to get to Whiskey Row. Like, I just have to collect myself again. That's in the past. It's part of a 250-mile race. At the end of the day, does it really matter? Not really, but it's those emotional shots that you take in a race like that if you don't control that mentally, you're going to go off the rails, and a little minor error becomes this big thing that it doesn't have to be.
Yeah, and I will say, Chris, in that section, once you top out the top of Mount Union and you get on that fire road, it is confusing. It's kind of one of those, and I'm sure it's well marked, but you're on a downhill. Finally, you're on a road. You're like, oh, this is great. I know I'm supposed to be going downhill, but it's one of those places where navigation is kind of tricky. There's a lot of little twisty, turny, maybe sort of double tracky things, and I mean they've designed this course to kind of connect these small, brutal single track sections with some larger, more gentle double track sections. And so it's easy to see how you could get sucked into that, especially, I mean, I assume at that point it was kind of nighttime.
Yeah. Nighttime.
And you're just like, so then you finally get back to Camp Kippa. You're like, okay, well, now I'm indoors. I'm warm. There's people here that are nice to me.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And that's the other thing, like in a race like this, you are fighting the entire time for up to 125 hours to stay focused, right? To stay on track, to pay attention. And the second that your body thinks, I need to keep moving forward, but maybe I can take a mental break. Yeah. That's where you get into trouble. And so you have to continue to be locked in the whole time. The course is marked well, but if you miss a flag and you go down a wrong trail, that's on you, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So, one of the things about this race that I love covering is the fact that I am on the air typically the first night doing Air Vibe After Dark, and we usually catch those first lead runners hitting Whiskey Row maybe a few minutes before midnight or thereabouts, depending on what the conditions are like. They might hit it a little bit earlier this year, but one of the things I love is waking up the next morning and, after a nice night's sleep and turning on the live stream and seeing the sunshine at Mingus Mountain. Can you talk about the climb to Mingus? Because that's I've run Man Against Horse, which is also taking place, at Mingus Mountain. And that's no joke on fairly fresh legs, 25 miles into a run. What's it like when you're 110 miles in?
Yeah, that was challenging. And I hadn't done a real good job with the sleep strategy either. And I could definitely feel it on that climb. And that was where it had been pulling at me, just the kind of sheer exhaustion. And then you get to the climb and you realize, like, I got to lock in. And I had to stop a few times during that one to try to get some dirt naps. And what's interesting too, during a race like this, you have these pacers and crew that comes out to support you, and they give up an entire week. And then they're excited to also see these trails too. And every 10 minutes I was like, I think I might just sit down and take a nap, and they're like, I can't wait to see all this stuff. And you're like, I need another nap. And so you kind of have to battle that as you're one of these runners, but it's a great climb. At the top, I remember I had, I think it was multiple bowls of like ravioli or something like that, which tasted like it was straight from Italy. It was so good at that moment, right? I just loved it. Bowl after bowl after bowl, got a nice nap up there. And that really reset it for me. But that was one of the most challenging moments I had, was going up Mingus.
Go ahead.
Yeah, well, I just wanted to say, I think that's a little bit of my challenge in terms of thinking through the sleep situation is, do I get some sleep before that, or do I try to forge on to Mingus? Like, I know that climb too for Man Against Horse. I love the climb up to Mingus. It's steady. It's hard, but it's not, it's not going to completely crush you. And from what I understand, the lasagna at Mingus Mountain Camp and the ravioli, and they call it a pasta, whatever. It's like an Italian restaurant up there, And if nothing else, that's going to pull me up there. Yep. Maybe a little glass of Chianti and then take a little 2-hour nap.
Nice. Yeah, then actually that's something I do want to circle back around to, talking about the food available at the aid station. So we want to make sure to put a pin in that for a little bit later. But working our way through the course, of course, when you leave Mingus Mountain, you're heading down towards Jerome and the Cottonwood area. And I feel like that's almost like the big, I guess, section number 2, or the second part of the second section of the race, basically going from Mingus Mountain to Sedona. So
I want to hear about the descent into Jerome.
Yeah. Let's talk about that.
A realistic description of it, because people freak out about it.
They do.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the best section of the race actually for me. I'm not gonna lie, because I had such a challenging time going up Mingus. I got some of that pasta. I took a little nap, and Michelle Hartwig was actually going to be my pacer for that section. And we got to the edge where you can kind of see everything overlooking, and she was like, I don't know if I can do this. And I'm like, I was still kind of recovering like mentally, and I'm like, it's okay. If you can't do this section, I'll just attack it on my own. Like, I'm used to training by myself. Like, maybe I just need a little bit of that time. And so that's what I did. And I just started slow. And it's back and forth and switchbacks and stuff, but it gave me a chance to reset. And it's so beautiful. Now, I had a chance to look at it kind of in like dusk and like late afternoon. So it was real nice and pretty. If you're doing it at night, I'm sure it's a little bit of a different story, but I really enjoyed that. And it was really the section for me that I had a little bit of a reset and some time by myself where I could kind of clear my head, and so that was a great section and a memory that I cherish actually from the race.
And what you've seen, okay, so actually this will kind of pivot into something that you have experienced that he has not, and there's a bit of a shift in the course, and we'll kind of blend into that right there.
Well,
talking about in Sedona.
Oh, right. So you get to Jerome, literally halfway mark, right? And this is the first of them. Leaving Jerome, going into Sedona, and after Sedona is the first significant course change in this year's race. And at the training weekend, I got a group together to do the second day and the third day, and we did the Sedona section up to Munns Park, and the Sedona section in previous years has gone just straight through up to the Cocodona Plateau on the Kasner climb and not gone through the Hangover Trail. Since Jamil got the idea for this race, he was like, we have to do the Hangover Trail. And so this year is the year we're doing the Hangover Trail. On the surface, the Hangover Trail, it's about a 4-mile loop in Sedona. That's maybe one of the most popular like tourist hikes in Sedona, or in maybe the entire state of Arizona. But with 134 miles on your legs, maybe in the dark, you don't really give a crap about the tourists that are following the little white paint dots on the slick rock. And so we went out, did a training run on it. And we had our group, whatever happened. And about 3 days later, Jamil was like, so heard the Hangover Trail was pretty rough. I was like, no, dude, it wasn't rough, but everyone's talking about, wow, this would be really hard at night. This would be really hard if it was wet. This would be really hard if you're on tired legs. This would be really hard if you don't have a pacer, especially the direction you're going, which is clockwise. And so, not to scare people, but like whoever you leave the Sedona Posse grounds with as your pacer, make sure they're ready for, what they're in for. I mean, we were making our pretty good time through there, and we were doing like 25-minute miles, and that's kind of good Cocodona miles. You do get through it, but there's a lot of route finding. There's a lot of just little tricky stuff, and if you're there in the daytime, there's probably tourists there that you're dodging, and they're taking selfies and everything else. So I really think Chris, that this is kind of point number one, that like when we get to talking about things like course records and everything else, like this little section, even for the best of the best, is going to take a little bit more work to get through.
So, Caleb, the high in Sedona on Wednesday is 67 degrees. How does that make you feel based on your experience from last year?
Yeah, I don't know if I have a comment on that, Chris.
How hot was it last year when you were going through Sedona?
I remember it was pretty hot. Yeah.
Was it in the 90s?
Yeah,
there we
it
go.
had to
There's
have
the
been.
forecast. Look at that.
Yeah, that's Sedona's forecast for this week. We're talking low 50s for Monday and Tuesday. So the lead runners are going to be hitting it on Tuesday, probably, in long sleeves, and maybe even throwing on an extra layer for night. And then come Wednesday, when most of the rest of the pack is getting there and those first Sedona Canyons runners are getting there, it's going to be brisk.
It's going to be brisk.
Really brisk.
But beautiful and crisp and nice. And then by the time it warms up, we'll all be through there, hopefully.
Yeah. Just kind of.
I really do think I don't want to make this sound terrible. It's a beautiful section of trail. If you get to go through it in daytime, you get some of the best Sedona views of all the red rocks, everything else. But you do have to have your wits about you. You do. And if there's one section of the course, and I've traversed maybe 140 of the 250 miles, if there's one section of the course you really want to have your head on straight, it's that one. And you just take a deep breath, slow down, make sure you're following the markers. This is not a place where you want to make a wrong turn, right? Just make your way through it. It's going to end, because once it ends, it's a wonderful climb up the road. It's actually much better than the Kasner Canyon climb. It's just up a road. You get your mind on autopilot. There's a water station up there. You restock on your water. And next thing you know, you're up at what used to be the Schnebly aid station. You cross under the 17, and now you're on the Coconino Plateau for the rest of the race. So it's a real transition point, but it's a little mind game, I think, to get through that part.
And Caleb, when it came to getting to the Coconino Plateau and up on top of it, how does that change where you're at mentally?
This race is filled with little moments where when you do a big climb like that, or you have this like grand perspective on where you came from, it just like hits you differently, right? So it was like Mingus was like that. Obviously Eldon was like that. The climb, coming out of Sedona was like that, where you just have an opportunity to look either back behind you at where you came from, or continue to see the mountains and Flagstaff getting closer and closer and closer, and realizing that all that work that you put in for this is paying off. And it's all of those are so special.
And when you talk about like the course, as I mentioned, I'm kind of like breaking it up into the sections that I kind of recognize as I've covered the race every year. Of course, as we mentioned, Jerome is the literal halfway point, but Sedona really feels like kind of like that, like turning the chapter kind of point. And the next section would be, in my mind, Sedona to Fort Tuthill with Munns Park right in the middle. It feels like that's almost like a couple of 25-ish mile sections that you break it up into.
Do me a favor though, and get the map up again, because another unique part of this year's race is two pacer-less sections, two no-pacer sections due to the Mexican spotted owl. And if you see the aid station here, if those of you looking at home, see where it says Foxborough Ranch. So you've had a pacer with you now. If you started with one at Whiskey Row, all the way to Foxborough Ranch, that big U-turn that goes out to the east from Foxborough Ranch to Munns Park, you do without a pacer. It's 16 miles. It's mostly on double track. There's not a lot of vertical, but it's just Coconino Plateau, kind of. Some people would probably think it was boring. You're just making this big U-turn. The Sedona Canyons people and others are going there. That's where they're taking the shuttle from Foxborough Ranch up to Munns Park. But that 16 miles, and again, this is 250-mile running. A lot of people are going to group up there. A lot of people are going to run together. It's a nice section of trail. It's Ponderosa Pines. It's wonderful. But don't sleep on Foxborough Ranch to Munns Park, because if you I could see people taking a lot of dirt naps in there just because it's so monotonous. Then once you get to Munns Park, then I'm with you. Then it's like Munns Park, get to Tuthill, Tuthill to Walnut is another no pacer section, right? So you got to go 32 miles with no pacer, and then you get to Walnut, and you're good to go up and over Eldon. Well, sort of good to go up and over Eldon.
Caleb, did you have pacers on a couple of these sections that were not allowed to have pacers, or that are not allowed to have pacers this year? Did you have?
Yeah.
Okay.
I did. Yep.
Do you think do you kind of concur with HEW maybe the fact that runners might be I guess grouping up perhaps, like maybe a de facto pacing situation?
Yeah, I think you need that because at some point the fatigue starts to set in, and just having somebody there to kind of smack you with their pole to keep you awake if you need it, right? Like there's those aspects of it where it's like, hey, let's help keep each other awake here, especially through the night, and just continue to move. Because if you can lock in with somebody and just try to match step for step and keep going forward, it makes it so much easier in a race like this.
Okay. And as you alluded to as well, like basically after you've left Munns Park, you get to what I consider to be like the last big way station on the course. Of course, it's where the Flagstaff Crest race starts, and that's at Fort Tuthill. I've been to Fort Tuthill many times. We have run the Big Pine and Blackout races up there for years, and I also do try and slide down there because it's one of the cool things I like about the fact that it is in Flagstaff. Like even though it's maybe 35-40 miles to go for the runners, it's only about a 4-mile drive for us from like downtown Flagstaff to Fort Tuthill. So it's the first time in a fairly significant section since Sedona where you're really fully into like what feels like civilization. So and when you get to that point and that like the stretch to Walnut Canyon is not difficult, at what point, I mean, or when you're at that point, what's on your mind, what's on your legs, like at that point?
You start to feel that you're getting close. And if you let your mind realize that, it becomes even harder. Like you can't let go of the I'm getting to Flagstaff. Like you start to see it and you start to ease up a little bit, and it just becomes exponentially harder, So you've got to keep your body locked in there. Last year, I do remember there was a controlled burn, if you guys remember that. So hopefully you don't have that this year. Yeah. I remember being like, where's all this coming from?
All of a sudden came out of nowhere.
Yeah, that was...
we don't have heat at the beginning. We don't have controlled burns. This is going to be the easy. This is soft-Sedona.
Yeah. So hopefully that's not a factor this year. But that was... that section, you just really start to feel it. And as a runner, especially, I mean, I finished in 97 hours, right? So as a runner, you have to not start trying to pick up the pace because you think I'm so close. You just have to continue to stay consistent, or especially that late in the race, you're going to burn yourself up, right? So you just keep doing what you're doing. And if you have some left at the end, great, but don't start pushing it 30 miles out. At that point, 30 miles seems like nothing though, and it's like, no, it's still a marathon plus, almost a 50K.
Yeah, and I would say, Chris, too, with this being the second no-pacer section, Tuthill to Walnut, runners are going to feel that kind of gravitational pull to Walnut. They're going to see their whole crew again. Yeah. They're going to get their pacer back again, and then it's Walnut, up and over Eldon, and back to Flagstaff. So that's really, I can't even believe I'm saying this because it's still 30 miles away, but like that's the smelling the barn part of the event. And with the new climb up Eldon, I will say this. I know I'm pushing us along the course here, but
no, for sure.
The new climb up Eldon, which goes much further east and up the Hart Trail, and it's a much gentler grade than the former Eldon Lookout Trail, which now mercifully we get to go down. It is one of those kind of climbs that's just kind of a 5-mile grinding, 3,000 feet in 5 miles, which a lot of us have done in training or whatever else. Then, of course, you lose 2,000 feet in 2 miles, and that takes maybe as long because it's big step downs and everything else. But I do think that the new route around Eldon, the way they're doing it, will be good. I don't know how much faster or slower it'll be, but the point I'm making is that from when you get to Walnut, it's like, okay, well, I've got a 50K. Right. It might be a 12 or 14 hour 50K, but it's a 50K. And that's where that Heritage Square is coming at that point.
Yeah, I gotta say, based on what I've seen in the shift in the course as far as going up Eldon, you compare what you're going to be doing this year versus what you had to do last year. And I think back, and for those of you who haven't seen the chase, go see the chase.
Yeah.
There's an excellent section of that film where they basically follow Harry and Jeff going up Eldon, and it's one of the better vantage points of Eldon I've seen, because I personally just hate that damn climb. For me, to see them, I'm just like, man, that's brutal. So talking about, did you hit that climb at day or night last year?
Very early morning. So probably around midnight is when I started making that, or maybe a little after. Yeah.
And I think what people are worried about is going down it at night.
Yeah, that's true too.
To the point where people might bank a little sleep and wait to go down it in the day if they can. Now, they won't be able to do that if it's Friday night into Saturday, because they'll have to just be going. But I think it'll be an interesting thing to go down in the dark. My hope is to get there in the light.
Yeah, I can see that, because I mean I've done Eldon in the day and I don't even like it then. Yeah. So I can totally see that. So as you're making your way through Flagstaff, of course, most people are going to be getting there. Like the lead pack will be getting there, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Looking at the forecast again, Wednesday, high of 56, low of 34. Thursday, high of 67, low of 40. Friday, high of 70, low of 44. That's a little bit more normal, I would say, once you get into the 70s. But
yeah, I mean, it's incredible. If this forecast holds, and it has all week, it's going to be incredible conditions for the Cocodona runners this year.
The one thing I will say, though, is that it looks like the rain kind of follows. It looks like it's moving northbound along with the runners, because Flagstaff has about a 45% chance of rain on Wednesday. So basically the chance of rain that they had starting at Whiskey Row is going to basically follow them for the entirety of the race. This might sound like a silly question on the surface, but when you're talking about an event such as this, like a 200+ mile race, I know you did Cocodona last year, and this is going to be your first one. When you're talking about races that are 100 miles or beyond, how much does it affect you if it's raining all day? How does that, does it slow you down? Does it speed you up? How does that affect you?
I think about two things more than any of it. You got to think about chafing, blisters, like that kind of stuff. Is that, does that come into play if you're not taking care of yourself? You don't have the right, kit and gear and things like that. The other one that's interesting for me with this, especially for the middle of the pack and the back of the pack, is going to be sleep, right? So if the course overall is significantly cooler, it's a little hard to take a dirt nap if it's 30 degrees and you don't have the right gear. So how does that impact people? Especially if it's raining and you're out there and you're in between a large section, between aid station to aid station, and you need to take a nap, and it's a rain or a sleet and it's 35 degrees. How are people going to handle that? And what is that going to be like? That could be pretty brutal for some folks, right?
My reaction actually would be similar to what Caleb was saying. I would just, if it was consistent rain and it was I would just put my head down and just try and plow through it. I don't.
Have you had that at races maybe in the second half of 100, where the weather is just sideways rain or just kind of gnarly and nasty? Is there a race or two that you?
I've had that in 100, but that's with when you maybe have 10 hours to go. But the thought of running through 30 hours of rain. Mm-hmm. If that's what Steve and Jamil have dialed up for this week, then then we haven't had rain down here, Chris, in a year and a half.
I know. That's the thing that gets me, is that we've had a very extended dry stretch here, and now it just happens that
if the floodgates open on Cocodona week, then I don't know. We'll just see. But even the race, even the mandatory gear makes rain jackets optional unless there's rain in the forecast. So we'll see. Steve might say on Sunday's briefing that, hey, guess what? Looks like there's enough of a threat of rain on whatever Tuesday, Wednesday. You guys are going to need actual rain jackets, which will mean there'll be a run on REI.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I would also say too that the style of person that signs up for Cocodona, if you could take a poll of the entire field of would you like it to be sideways rain, heavy wind, maybe snow and sleet, it'd probably be like 95% would say yes.
Yeah.
Like it's just
I agree.
that's the person, you know.
Because you're all built different. Like that's the thing. Like, you know, you running the race last year, you running it this year. I have no desire. I remember when I first talked to Jamil about this race, and you know, I've told the story, and I'll probably tell it again during the race coverage, that I first heard about this race in 2018. I had to keep my mouth shut for 2 years.
Wow.
And
Not easy for Chris to do.
yeah. I mean, it was basically over, you know, Sky Point to the Rum Bar in Silverton, where, you know, Jamil, myself, and a couple of people were talking. And, you know, when, you know, Jamil is describing the course, the first thing I said when he got done describing it is that, man, I can't wait to DNF that. Like, you know, and then I realized he actually, you know, put me on the initial wait list. And then I realized as it got closer, it's like, I have no interest in doing this whatsoever. That's just beyond my scope of comprehension.
And then I love how you were leaving the bar and he looked at you and he's like, it's called Cocodona.
Yep. That's
In 2018. It's called Cocodona.
And like I said, I had to keep my mouth shut. And when they finally put that teaser trailer out during COVID, I was so excited that I could just open my mouth. Like, so, but, you know, with that, we've kind of, you know, talked about the course. Of course, you know, we're going to have the famous, you know, finish through Buffalo Park and down through the streets of Flagstaff, left on Birch, and then down Cocodona Alley. We basically just kind of named half the streets in town at this point. But let's talk about the people that are running the race. Let's start with the women's field. The women's field is going to be absolutely stacked. You know, I think like initially I was looking at maybe like 5 to 7 names to follow on the women's side, but then the more I looked and the more I read, the more I thought, well, there's a lot of people with some very deep resumes in this field that, you know, maybe upon first glance are not familiar names, but you know, as we learned last year at this race, you know, we might not be all that familiar with somebody at the start, but we'll get to know them by the finish. Mm-hmm. And but with all that said, it's a Courtney Dauwalter race, and so when you're covering a Courtney race, and we've had the opportunity to cover a few of them, you can't begin a discussion about the women's field or even the overall field about a race that she's in without thinking, you know, unless something goes wrong, she is the absolute overwhelming favorite. That's how I look at it. I don't know how the two of you would compare that in your minds.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, she's just time and time again. And when you think that she can't do any more, she does, you know? And so I'm sure, I mean, she is just the queen of the hundreds and of everything that she does, and she's always so humble about what her goals and aspirations are, and she's always just happy to be out there. And what that competitor in her, you know that she wants to come in here and crush this.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I mean, it's just this is the next big thing. I mean, if you can throw in Cocodona 250 course record, right? Beat everybody. I mean, for somebody like her, it's just I can't wait to watch it. It's going to be incredible.
Hey, Jeb, you've covered her career for a long time.
Yeah, I have, and I love Courtney, and she's my pick to win. But I also she hasn't run this far in 7 years.
Yeah.
You know, 7 years is a long time in the life of a elite level ultramarathon runner, and there is a circumstance about this that reminds me, and you all can click this on your bingo card now, of the 2019 Western States when Courtney, you know, came in the prohibitive favorite and ran an incredible race up to about halfway and started wavering and having some troubles, and then ended up having to drop out. And what proceeded after that was one of the most incredible women's finishes in the history of Western States, when Claire Gallagher and Brittany Peterson literally went stride for stride for 22 miles from the river crossing to the finish. I will never forget the video of Paul Lind, who was Brittany Peterson's coach at the time, whispering in Brittany's ear nobody knew what he was whispering, but what he was whispering was like Courtney's faltering. And Claire and Brittany had this incredible finish. Now, I don't wish this on Courtney at all, but I tell you what, if Courtney falters at all, she's got a cavalry coming behind her. Mika Thews, who fell and took 8 hours off last year and is an absolute master class of running 250 miles, has three finishes here, is not going to go down lightly. And Rachel Entrekin has made this like her focus for the last basically 12 months.
After winning last year.
They could very well be, if that happened again, they could be Brittany and Claire of Cocodona. I'm not saying it's going to happen. I mean, I think both of them would say, oh, yeah, sure, it's Courtney's race to lose. But, like, they're not going to be 8 hours behind. They're not. And I think that's going to be a really interesting thing to check out. And how much Courtney pays attention to whether she goes for the overall win or takes care of herself and just runs her race or some version of in between.
What do you think her strategy looks like with this, Courtney? Like, do you think she comes out of the gates fast, or knowing that the absolute ballers that she has, that to your point, are going to be right behind her? I mean,
no, I think Courtney's going to do what she always does, which is she's just going to run on how she feels.
Yeah.
She's going to take what the course gives her. She's going to love the fact that the weather's good. You know, she's going to run with a great deal of joy, and she's not going to stress herself at all. Yeah. You know, the only things that have brought her down in Hard Rock, the year Sabrina ended up winning, in this Western States I've talked about, is like some sort of kind of fluky injury thing. And it ended up not even be like a long-term injury. So, I mean, I hope that we've never really experienced Courtney like having stomach problems or foot problems or her quads being trashed like the rest of us normal people have all the time. So, I mean, it's her race to lose, but I guess the point I'm making is if she falters at all, I mean, the cavalry's coming.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And the thing is that, you know, obviously we've dwelled on Courtney here, but, you know, there's still such a stout women's field. You mentioned two of the top competitors, Mika Thews, Rachel Entrekin. We have a former champion also coming back in Sarah Ostaszewski, who has a 5th, a 3rd, and a 1st here. You know, Sarah's not coming here to podium. She's coming here to win. Mm-hmm. Like that's the kind of mindset she has.
And Lindsay Dwyer, who you directed me to Lindsay's training a couple of days ago, and she's out of the Bay Area. And I would venture to guess that she's done 2 years worth of training in the last 5 months.
Have you seen her training?
Which I think you said the average is sort of 145 miles and 16K a week since the new year.
Yeah, something absurd like that.
I mean, and with no faltering at all. I mean, 33 years old, experienced at this distance. Don't sleep on her either.
Last week, I believe her total was 161 miles or something like that, with, you know, maybe 20,000 feet of climb. You know, what Lindsay's doing to prepare for this race is absolutely stunning. But, you know, there are also, you know, several other competitors that, you know, we haven't touched upon yet. One of them that I have been kind of doing more of a dive on is Kyla Rose Maher, somebody who I've met with and interacted with before. I mean, you know, her 2024 was pretty stout. 2nd at I Am Tough, 2nd at Bighorn, and 2nd at Crazy Mountain. You know, he's been making podiums at very difficult races.
Mountainous races.
Yeah. So this could be a situation where she's, you know, gonna, you know, come in and feel right at home. It might be longer, but that's definitely, you know, another name that I've been following.
And Georgia Porter seems focused on this.
Absolutely.
Georgia Porter, AZT, FKT runner, really seems to have directed their focus at this event, and I'll be interested to see how that goes as well.
Yeah, that was the other name I had. And I'm curious, too, as this race continues to evolve, like, as you think about the thru hikers and folks that are doing that are more FKTs versus, like, the hard, fast 100-milers, like, I wonder where this will end up. Maybe not this year particularly, but will those fast 100-milers continue to push the limits on this to a point where the thru hikers and more of the FKT folks, it's a little bit of a different game than it historically has been? Or, you know, will speed become a giant factor in this, or what will that look like? And I'm curious if we'll see a difference this year between different groups, or if it will continue to kind of be a mixed bag.
Yeah. Speaking of speed, another person in the field that I was looking at, Kaylee Demerjian. Kaylee has a 15-hour 100-mile PR and is coming into this race. Hasn't done a ton of mountainous long stuff like this, more of the Brazos Bend type stuff, the flatter, faster stuff. But we've seen some of that translate. Just ask Arlen Glick what it's like.
I was just going to say, I think she could be a version of this year's Arlen, like when she finally gets to the running time. I mean, Arlen was closing. He just wasn't closing fast enough.
Yeah. Another contender, Catherine Edwards Anderson, who won Sedona Canyons last year by 3 hours. And her victory by 3 hours was over another stout runner, Rachel Buzzard. These are, the women's field is for real this year, and I can't wait to follow that race. Are there any other contenders that we possibly haven't touched on
We mentioned
yet?
Sarah O, right? So that's what I got.
Okay, because we also got Maya Detmer on the Air Viper Racing team coming in. I don't know if she's necessarily a contender for, maybe finishing top 3, but I could definitely see her sliding into the top 5, top 8, maybe, perhaps. And there was another name that caught my eye as well, I believe. Randy Orme out of Utah has a lot of.
I did see that, yeah.
Yeah, a lot of mountain races. I believe an 18-hour 100-mile PR. So it'll be interesting to see. There are other women in the race that who are kind of unproven on maybe this kind of terrain or maybe this kind of distance, but it'll be interesting to follow. Another one, Allison Powell, one more that I missed before, finished third at Bigfoot a couple years ago, won the not Continental Divide, but the Divide 200 up in Alberta.
I think that's a really high, tough race, too.
Yeah, it's
with
famously
like
tough.
exposure and cliffs you can fall off and die and stuff like that.
Yeah, so that's the women's field. I mean, we named about 12, 15 runners that could definitely make this race very interesting. Obviously, as we mentioned, with Courtney running this race, all eyes are going to be on her.
Yeah.
We know that.
Tell Chris. You can tell it's Cocodona week because Chris has done his homework.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I do my best. I mean, I'm going to be on the air for probably about 45 hours this week, so I got to make sure I know what I'm talking about. And one of the things about covering this race last year was not knowing enough about the guy that won it coming in. I had seen his name. I had seen, that he had some pretty impressive results, but I did not know who Harry Schubertus was. And by God, by the end of the week, he had let us know exactly who he was, which was an amazing thing. As far as the men's field goes, is there a Harry Schubertus that maybe a lot of the viewers might not be familiar with? Is there anybody that you've seen that might, stick out as okay, we got to look at this person from jump?
Like a dark horse, like he was.
Yeah.
Oof. I don't see one.
Okay.
I don't see one. I do see Harry coming back as a runner who now we all know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now he's the hunted as opposed to the hunter.
I do see a guy who has matured, in his training, but is still the same guy who lives out of his van and gets jobs that will make him physically fit, and he happened to get into Western States and he's going to run that too, and so I think we'll see how Harry responds to being the hunted, but he's got such a steady level head about him. It'd be hard to imagine him faltering in any significant way.
Yeah, and I wonder how much Courtney's presence takes some of the pressure off.
That's interesting.
You don't typically have that dynamic, and is he the biggest person here that's being hunted, or is it her, and does he feel that?
And could there be a point where the two of them are going at it, very late in the race? Yeah. We talked about Harry, having won the race last year. There's also two other men's champions in this field. Michael McKnight and Mike Versteeg couldn't be more different in their personalities as we've learned over time. What are your thoughts on the two of them coming in for another bite at the apple?
I think Michael McKnight wants to make right on last year. I think he was disappointed with his race last year. I don't think he should have been, but he was. He soldiered on for a finish, and I think he's probably made some adjustments both in his training and his nutrition strategy to avoid that. I think Versteeg, I mean, as he has said now repeatedly, like, this is his hometown race. This is his Western States. This is, if he can come back here and run it every year, and, he knows the course. He won the inaugural race. He loves it. I think there's only so fast he can go. But, I mean, if you're in the front and he's behind you, you got to worry about him, because he's not going to use much downtime. He's not going to waste time. And once he gets up on the Cocodona Plateau, he's going to move. So I'd be concerned about both of those guys for different reasons. Versteeg, because he's almost like defending home turf, and McKnight because he wants to, sort of correct or just make a little better what he did last year.
Yeah, the interesting thing about him too, in the series with Distance to Empty, when he was on in Airvipa, Mike said, I want to go head to head with Courtney, and I had thought about taking this year off. But then when I saw her name, I wanted to race it, and that's an interesting dynamic too, and just kind of shows that ripple effect that it's had. Yeah.
Speaking of people who have won races, not necessarily won this race, there is a Western States champion in the midst.
Indeed, Ryan Sands, and he's been here for a month from South Africa. I'm a huge Ryan Sands fan. For those of you who don't remember, in 2017 or 2016 Western States, when Walmsley took that wrong turn, in 2017, when Walmsley was puking his guts out at the river and had to drop out, Ryan ended up winning that race. Ryan has been around the sport a long time. This is his first foray into this long of a race. He's done some real long FKT type stuff. He's not going to come here just, to have fun. He wants to compete, and he's talented. He's hardworking, and I wouldn't sleep on Ryan Sands.
Yeah.
Talking about some of the other contenders that we've seen here year in, year out, one of them that comes to mind, actually two of them that come to mind, we'll talk about them both kind of in tandem because of the fact that they're both not only very talented runners, but they're very loquacious, very chatty. And that would be Jeff Garmeyer and Kevin Goldberg. Both of them no strangers to top 5 finishes at Cocodona, and both of them out here yet again to make their way from Black Canyon City to Flagstaff.
Yeah, the cool thing with Kevin too is he's doing all these interviews. So how much additional intel does he have? He's piecing together like the perfect strategy, asking everybody what their secrets are, how they're going to attack it. Just all in the name of a good episode. But yeah, it'll be fun to see how he combines all that and if it impacts him this year.
I just think Goldberg would do so much better if he wasn't carrying 6 battery chargers in his back, so he could stay on the live stream chat for the entire week.
The thing is, for those that have not seen Kevin Goldberg race, Kevin has, like I said, I think he has back-to-back top 5 finishes from 2022 and 2023. I think last year he was probably about 10th or 12th place, thereabouts. Kevin is in the chat during the live stream within hours of starting the race. As soon as he's got signal, he pops in.
And he insists that it makes him better.
Yeah. he says that it gives him, focus and also, enables him to think about other things, like other than how much he's hurting. Like that's one of the things that it boggles my mind that he can just sit there and I assume he's using voice to text or something like that, but he's sitting there watching the live stream as the race goes. From a strategic standpoint, Caleb, did you or did your crew watch the live stream to see what was going on? To, I guess, maybe grab intel.
Yeah, not for me. I finished at 97 hours. My experience was just being the fan of wanting to know what the top of the field was doing and just being so uber curious of what was going on. And then it was fun because Kevin's not the only one that's doing that, because I'd be running with somebody else and it's like, hey, did you see so-and-so pass so-and-so? And everybody is doing that. I mean, everybody that's running this race is a fan of the race and what it stands for and the now history of it. So I think it's pretty common in the field. People just might not be jumping into the chat.
By the way, if you could sign me up for a 97-hour finish right now, I'd take it. So don't sit here and say, I only finished 97 hours.
Yeah. And that's something I was going to get to as well. But obviously the live stream has...
No, hang on. Let's go to Garmeyer.
Yes.
Because Garmeyer, he's not all on his phone all the time.
Right.
But he's like, you're going to hear Garmeyer from a mile away. And I love that guy. He'll talk to anybody. He'll talk to trees. He'll talk to bushes. He'll talk to cacti. And, he's one of the legacy guys, right? I think he's finished it every year. Last year, was really, had a knee issue for a lot of the race, still gutted it through. He, from what I understand, has had a really good training block. And
it's hard to tell because he never sells it.
Right, yeah. But I mean, you mentioned we're in talking about loquacious guys. I mean, Garmire's not all over the chat, but man, he is. He's primed for this race every year, and I look forward to seeing how he does.
Yeah.
Another guy that is an experienced competitor at this race, has a podium finish in the 250 as well as a win at Sedona Canyons, is Michael Greer.
Yeah.
And a local here, and I feel like with all of the chatter online, I haven't seen a lot of conversation about his name as a contender. It's kind of surprising.
I think one thing cool about Michael Greer is he likes staying below the radar. He also, I don't know, I haven't done the deep dive on this, but he is really efficient at aid stations. He's really efficient kind of just in doing all the stuff that you need to do and being sort of a modern 250-mile racer. Yeah. And he'll be there at the end, no doubt. I want to mention too, one more name, if I could jump in, Jesse Haynes, who won last year's Moab 240, is a 50-something, is kind of probably sort of this year's version of Browning. Maybe not quite as accomplished as Browning, but he could surprise you. He's got a couple of secret weapons up his sleeve, including Carl Meltzer, who's coming down to pace him. So I think it'll be fun to see how Jesse plays out in this more competitive 250 than Moab was.
Mm-hmm. Of course, we've got a couple other big names in this race that maybe are not familiar, I guess, to the people who are kind of narrow focused in this race, but a couple of names that really, scream, this race has become a big deal. Kevin Russ and Cameron Haynes. Mm-hmm. I mean, for those that are not familiar with Kevin Russ, talking about 250,000 followers on Instagram, and he and Jamil had themselves a race that lasted a month out on the streets of Tempe back in January, where they basically that was the famous Chipotle Challenge. Yeah. And then Cameron Haynes, I mean, you talk about a guy who is basically, I would say if you're talking about like a quote crossover superstar, he's one of the two of them that really stick out to me. We'll talk about the other one in just a few minutes, and I know you know who I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. But yeah, Cameron Haynes, what can we expect from these two guys? Do you think any thoughts on what we're going to see from them?
I think Cameron Haynes is coming into this with a wonderfully positive attitude, and it just kind of wants to enjoy it and soak in the experience, and then probably when it gets real, we'll probably see, sort of his, a side of him that maybe we're not used to in the kind of public eye. And Kevin is just a grinder. I mean, we saw that in the Chipotle Challenge, but he's a through hike. He's definitely, as your point about the through hikers he's definitely on that through hiker side. Mm-hmm. Like I could see him getting away with very little sleep in this whole thing and not having any issues and just being able to plow along.
Yeah. Yeah. And Cam Haynes, he's had Courtney on a lot. I think they're pretty good friends. That's going to be interesting what he's learned from her, as well as he's very close with Taylor Spike, right? So he's got a lot of people in his circle that have a lot of experience in races like this. So he's going to be able to tap into that. And I think just taking a step back and the appreciation for where the sport is, and particularly where this race is, that you have somebody like a Cam Haynes that's coming out to do this, because he's heard so many wonderful things about it and the community and the race itself. That's such a huge deal. Yeah. And it's so cool. What I appreciate most about it is the eyes that it's going to put on this race, that's going to bring people in from other walks of life who have no idea really about ultra running. I mean, they see him do his runs online and whatever else, but then to tune in and watch him do this race, how many people are now going to be pulled into ultra running, whether it's Cocodona or not? But it's going to change lives by people like him doing races like this, and that's pretty cool.
There's also a segment of runners that are well, and they're in most of these cases looking for their first finish at Cocodona. But there's like 3 or 4 guys that I was thinking of that came to mind here. I saw one of them mentioned in the chat. Shout out on that. Jackson Wolf. For those that aren't familiar, Jackson Wolf has been chewing up 100-milers and 200-milers for training for like the last 6 months. His ultra sign up is basically just 100-miler and ultra after 100-miler after 200-miler for this season. Another one that I wanted to kind of put in that same vein is Jake Jackson. Jake Jackson did finish the race last year. Former U.S. national team member in the 24-hour discipline, has covered 160 miles in 24 hours. You don't do that without being extremely talented. Another one is Corey Waltering, pro runner for Merrill. Corey did not have a good year here in 2021, but he has definitely refocused and redoubled his efforts both personally and professionally, that I would expect him to have a much better year. And the other one is a guy we've seen have success in Arizona, and that's Dan Green.
Yeah, I was going to mention Dan Green. He's been loading up the training as well. He had a great javelina. I think he decided after that to kind of focus 100% in on this, soak up advice from other people who've done this. And I mean, he's a tough West Virginia boy, and I think he's not coming here to just have fun. He's gonna be focused and push.
Yeah, Dan Green's training also has been through the roof.
Yeah. I haven't taken a look.
He's had 160-mile weeks. He's had huge climbs. I had a chance to talk to Stringbean today, and he had ran with Dan Green, I don't think too long ago, and he was kind of raving about his skills and just like his mentality and his attitude. So that's going to be interesting. When I did watch Dan Green's interview, again, on that Distance to Empty series through Aravaipa, one of the things that stood out is just he's very it's the vibe feel, right? It's very chill. And I am super curious to see how that translates. He's super gifted, got tons of speed. But then, like, how does that translate into a race like Cocodona, where you have to be a little type A, right? And how you're planning out your entire week. And will that translate? And what will that look like for a guy like him?
Yeah, and that's the thing. And keep in mind, we don't mean to exclude anybody by, like, not mentioning them. That's the problem, is that this field is so damn good that we've got so many people. Max Jolliffe is another name that we haven't talked about that isn't a lot of lips to hear this week. So
yeah, I think Max is going to be right there, and his training's been on point, and yeah.
There was a name. Now, this is one that I was not familiar with until about 2 days ago. Shout out to my friend Julian Galuzzi, who is a member of the Pete's Meats team up in Flagstaff, who helps prepare food. And yeah, Mike McKnight was asking in the chat if Pete's Meats was going to be there with no Eldon Summit aid station. Yes, they will be setting up at which aid station was that? AJW, I believe. The one right before.
I think there's been some discussion whether they're going to be at Trinity Heights or the one before Eldon.
I think Wildcat.
Wildcat would be the better one for them to be at, because that's the aid station right before Walnut.
So the name that I was brought to by Julian's attention is Jack Scott. And Jack is one of those where if you're looking at Ultra Sign Up, he's got nothing.
Yeah.
But if you slide over to the UTMB page and you do a little bit of digging, the ITRA page, you get a scene like, oh, wow, this guy can do something. So the Montaigne Spine races, my familiarity with them comes from Pete Mortimer, my coach, who has finished second at the Summer Spine race. So Jack won the Winter Spine race last year. And it's a little bit tricky to try and find context. You almost have to use like a transitive theory thing to kind of book things here. But so this is what I found out about the Montaigne Spine race that Jack won last year. First of all, he won it by about 9.5 hours, which is pretty impressive. He had a 72:55. This is for a 268-mile race, I believe. And second place, Damian Hall finished in 82:25. Now, the first familiar name I could find was the women's winner, Claire Banwarth. Mm-hmm. And Jack beat Claire by 19 hours. You're talking about somebody who's won Moab overall, a woman who's won Moab outright. So trying to figure out, basically just using what information we have, Jack Scott's somebody that I expect to be on our radar the entire week and, at the very front of the pack. So, I shout out Julian again. I was not familiar with him. And, as I do my homework, I make my way down the list. I look at the names I know and look for a few names. And then, of course, I do slide down to the bottom because, it's not unprecedented for us to have people without ultra signups, pop up into our awareness. So
it should happen every year. Chris, that's your job. Go through the people who don't have any results and find out how good they are.
Well, I mean, and
It's
you
a great job for you.
It's for somebody without a life, it's absolutely perfect. I mean, it's what I do. It's how I spend my time. Another name that we haven't mentioned at all, and you talking about, people who are very visible in the sport. This guy finished in 7th place last year, Finn Melanson.
Yeah.
And the thing I love about watching Finn as he's prepared for this race, some people, approach their training with a little veil of secrecy, or they, keep things to themselves. Finn is the exact opposite. For a guy who is a legit contender at this race, he finished at 70 hours last year. He put everything out there for the world to see. There are no secrets in what Finn brings to the table.
Yeah. Well, no, and I think Finn's ready. He took his first year experience. He's kind of got his gear dialed in, his sleep plan dialed in. Be great to see how he does.
Yeah. And that year 1 to year 2 jump, or year 2 to year 3, is always fun to watch as well, right? So, yeah, super excited. Another guy that's gotten a lot of feedback from other people as he's interviewed him, right? I mean, with single track and everything that they're doing and all the interviews and things that they do, getting tons of information from other people that have ran this race that he can compile into his own little bank and then build a race strategy from everything he's learning from folks, which is pretty cool.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's one of the things about this race is that there's so many names, and the beauty of having a race with a 125-hour cutoff. But by the way, we're going to be live streaming for 115 hours of it. That's what we found out.
Just taking 10 hours off, 2 5-hour breaks.
And for those, we'll actually have static cams at a couple of the aid stations.
Yeah.
So we are going wall to wall with our coverage in some form or fashion.
Yeah.
So,
and we all know most of you don't plan on getting any work done next week anyway. This will just give you another excuse.
It's actually a wonderful thing to know, and that's one of the things, Caleb, you'll realize and recognize when you see that there are thousands of people watching us on a Tuesday afternoon. Why? Because they're basically on their spreadsheets, they're doing their work, but they've also got an earbud in or something. It's truly magical. Thank you very much to you, those of you who do tune in, because that's what makes this this race so special. One of the things we also like to do, actually, you know what? I'm going to hold off on that for a second. One of the things that we talked about before was at the aid stations. You talked about the lasagna, and one of the things that's been amazing to me, following, obviously, I do have association with Aravaipa and have for a long time, is the care and the effort put forth, not only in trying to put together enough food and good food out there, but the creativity involved. I remember a couple of years ago, my friend Chrissy, who works for Aravaipa, Aravaipa downstairs, does a lot of the clothing design. She was talking about being in charge of one of the aid stations later in the race a couple of years ago, and she's talking about chicken and grits. What were some of your favorite aid station meals as you went through the course last year, and what are you looking forward to?
Yeah, I talked earlier about the pasta going up Mingus. The other one, I don't remember exactly which aid station it was, but they had a chili mac, and I remember the race actually by the food as much as anything, because it tastes so good. And I remember when I got that chili mac, I was so hungry, I pulled a chair right up to the aid station table. And it was almost like an old scene from a bar where you would drink the beer and you'd tap the table and they'd fill it back up. And it was like that. It was like 3-4 bowls of chili mac they just kept putting down in front of me. I'm like, this is the best I've ever had. So yeah, the food, the aid stations, there's creativity at all of them, to your point, Chris. It's not just a burger and a quesadilla, right? It's a spread of food. And that was one of the things for me last year that I really learned along the way, is you have to be diverse in what you're eating. This isn't a 100-mile race, right? This is a multi-day. You need real food.
You can't do 80 gels.
Yeah, you're not just doing that. So that was it was a welcome surprise to just see the variety across the board. It was awesome.
Yeah, mine's kind of on both ends of the race, Chris. I'm real in terms of what I'm looking forward to. I'm looking forward to first Crown King, right? The wonderful thing is the saloon provides the food, black bean burgers.
I didn't know. Their food is really good.
Black bean burgers, regular burgers, pulled pork sandwiches with all the fixins. So potato salad, coleslaw, So you've done this all day thing. You sit down, you stretch your legs, you take your pack off, and you dive into a good pulled pork sandwich with potato salad and slaw and beans and everything else before you get out on the Senator Highway. So I'm really looking forward to that. Last year, we got a little bit of a break from the broadcast, and I was like, I'm going to go stretch my legs and run up Eldon and check out with Pete's Meats. And so Pete Mortimer was up there, and he was like, he had a couple nips of whiskey, so his British accent was in full strength at that point. And he was like, "Oh, AJW, you're here. You've got to try one of everything." And so I tried one of everything, which was great. And then he packed me up, in foil, 3 more things of everything that I could carry down in my pack.
That's right. Yeah,
and we could sample on Aravaipa After Dark that night. So that was wonderful. And so I have to admit, and especially now that they've moved over to Wildcat, which I think is a much better place for Pete's Meats to be set up before the Eldon climb, I'm looking forward to Pete's Meats. And I will, I still feel bad. He was out at Jackass Junction at Javelina this year, and I was just having a really good race. And there were a lot of people who were having bad races. And so they were hanging out eating Pete's Meats. And so I roll in there, and I'm just changing out my pack and getting my water, and he was like, "Andy, aren't you going to have any?" And I was like, "Sorry, I'm out of here." And
he gets it, though.
Yeah, so I won't do that this year. But I'm looking forward to Crown King and Pete's Meats.
Yeah, I just got a heads up from Julian that said that they're starting to cook on Monday. So they'll start on Monday, and I would assume, basically have things ready by Wednesday afternoon, because
that's fantastic.
That's when those lead runners probably Wednesday, maybe late afternoon, early evening. I mean, if you're talking, a 60-hour potential first place finisher, that would be 5 p.m. on Wednesday. Yeah. So Pete's Meats is probably going to be up and running by about 2 p.m. on Wednesday afternoon. What would did you sample Pete's Meats last year?
I did. Yes, I did. And that was the other, going up Eldon and getting to the top, in my head at that point I was like, I'm done with Cocodona. This is it. Had a sausage, hung out, and then you have that longer descent. And I remember I got into Buffalo Park, and like I said, that's kind of what I was alluding to earlier when I'm like, mentally, you have to stay in it until you're at that finish line, because I got into Buffalo Park, and I remember I looked at my pacer, and I'm like, I'm done. And they're like, "What?" I had 4 miles left. I'm like, I don't care anymore. I'm done. And I kept walking forward, but it's I had the sausage, and that was a good hang.
Well, I know that the aid stations and in particular the famous Pete's Meats do bring people back, and it gives them something to look forward to. There's a half dozen people who have been what we, I guess, call legacies here at Cocodona 250. And I want to shout them out. We already mentioned one of them, Jeff Garmeyer. Mm-hmm. These are runners who have run this race and finished this race every year, and they're going for number 5, which basically would put them at about roughly 1,250 miles on this Cocodona course. Shout out to Jeff Garmeyer, Jose Sosa, Brian Janzik, Andy Glaze, Wes Plate, and Aaron Flesher. And, I know that in some of those cases we've got some really familiar names. Jeff Garmeyer is very familiar. Andy Glaze, unless you've been under a rock, you know who he is. Wes Plate puts together a great video after most of his races, and goes, like, if you got 7 hours to kill, a Wes Plate video will set you up right there. But Aaron Flesher's one that I wanted to bring up because so Aaron came into the first Cocodona with really not much of a running background. He's more of a through hiker. And somewhere along the way, he started to get pretty good at this because his improvement from the first year he ran this to the fourth year he ran this, literally more than a day. Mm-hmm. Like, I believe that his first year he finished in around 121 hours, give or take. And I believe that his last finish was 94 hours. So you're talking about 26, 27 hours improvement over the course of 4 years. And, I'd be curious to see, I hope to see him this weekend and find out, if he's planning on, cutting off that yet again. Can you imagine, like, year over year returning to a race and, like, cutting off, say he cuts off like something similar, you're cutting 30 hours off from year 1 to year 5? Super impressive.
Yeah, that is impressive. And here's to those guys for coming back again.
Yeah, absolutely. No, for sure. And one of the things that we do, Caleb, at these is also we give, we each, I guess we call it Faces in the Crowd, where basically we each pick a runner or two. We try and do a female runner and a male runner. And basically, our experience with them, kind of give people a reason to cheer for them. So I guess without any further ado, let's start with you, AJW, and let's talk about your women's race, Face in the Crowd.
Yeah. So I got to get my notebook here. Hang on. I got my notes. But I had a tough time with this. I call it our human interest stories but there's so many in this year's race. But I had to go with Sarah Wallace. Sarah Wallace is 43 years old. She's out of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. She's a professor at University of Pittsburgh. And she's a streak runner. She's run every day, I want to say, for like 20 years or 18 years or something. She's run all those beastly East Coast things, Eastern States, Laurel Highlands, and about 5 years ago started jumping into 200-mile races, and, so did Tahoe and Bigfoot and, Moab and comes out and does the Grand Canyon, and she also almost lost her during COVID, because in addition to being a streak runner, she runs group runs 5 days a week. She's 100. I didn't even know that was possible. She just runs with other people. I remember I coached her for a couple of years, and in our initial call, about 20 minutes into the call, she was like, my husband wanted me to tell you this. I really run with other people almost all the time. Right. And so she was on the wait list, and she's just incredibly bubbly personality. I think she's a marketing professor or something like this. But she is just so incredible, so much fun. She was on the wait list for Cocodona, and I think when first she texted me and she was like 87th, and she's like, AJW, you think I'm going to get in? And I was like, yeah, you're going to get in. Get your plane tickets. I just can't wait. I cannot wait to see how Sarah Wallace does. I tell you what, too, if you're going into one of those no pacer sections and you want someone to talk to, find Sarah Wallace and you'll be good to go for 5 hours. But she's my human interest story. I can't wait to see. From Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, I've had a bunch of East Coast friends who've come out here and run the race, had a great time. It's not scary like some other West Coast races. I mean, East Coasters do a great time out here, and I can't wait to see how Sarah does. So she's my special interest. She's going to keep her streak alive. I think she'll probably end up getting 4 days of runs. She might have to do something on, trot around the neighborhood in Flagstaff on Saturday to keep her streak going. But I just love that. I can't wait to see her.
Nice. Caleb.
Yeah, mine's Randy Zuckerberg. So obviously the Zuckerberg family is well known everywhere. Randy is running this race. I've had a chance to just kind of become acquaintances with her through social media, and met her at Black Canyon this year. And this past week, I had the opportunity to talk to her on her show and talked about Cocodona and what that's like and what she's expecting and kind of what my experience was. And having, like, same deal as the Cam Hanes thing, right? Like, having somebody like that who pulls in people into the sport from all walks of life all around the world, right? The sport is changing, and part of that is because folks are bringing others in. But I think the cool thing is somebody like a Randy who has had these incredible life experiences is finding the sport and finding a love in the sport that we all love, and is bringing people in not to change it, but to be a part of it. And that's an incredible story. I'm excited for Randy and everything that she's got going on this weekend. And I'm excited for her to talk to people about this epic race afterwards. And how many people's lives is she going to be able to change by opening the door for them to something that they never would have heard about had it not been for her?
So what's funny is that I didn't realize until I started doing a little bit of digging that I actually met Randy because she was running Black Canyon 50K with Ashley Paulson. And I ran with Ashley from most of Hidden Treasure to Bumblebee. I would say probably the first 3.5, 4 miles I ran with her and her crew, and there were like 4 people total. Didn't realize that she was one of them. So that's pretty fascinating. So she's already gotten a little bit of time out on these Arizona trails. So the ruggedness that we're used to won't take her by surprise.
Yeah, and I think over the last year and a half, she's done like 10 plus ultras, and it's just like seems to have really fallen in love with it. in that experience. And so, yeah, it's going to be a fun story to watch.
That's definitely not an uncommon thread for people to just jump in and all of a sudden fall in
Head
love
first.
with it. So,
yeah.
How about you, Chris?
Mine is somebody that locals probably know, and if you've ever been at an Aravaipa event, you've probably come across Aylin Davis. And Aylin is she's a member of the Aravaipa team. She lives, I believe, in Kanab, Utah now, but she comes down to work on all the races that she can. She's hearing impaired. She's deaf. And she is going to go for her finish at Cocodona this year. Now, she attempted the race last year, did not have the week that she had hoped for, but she's going back at it. And I can't wait. Aylin, for those who have experienced her, obviously, she communicates differently, but she's always got such a positive energy. She can't, if she knows you, if she meets you once, she's going to hug you every time she sees you. Yeah. She's going to, ask how you're doing. She really cares. She's, just super bubbly and outgoing. And I'm hoping that this is the opportunity that she has to have the week that she's hoping for. And so Aylin Davis is my human interest story. And I think that, it would be pretty amazing to see her come across the finish line. And I'm just rooting so hard for it to happen. Yeah. I'm going to start off on the men's side with my human interest story.
So we're doing, what do they call it in the draft? We're doing
snake
draft.
Yeah. So mine is Shad Burkles.
All right.
So you guys know Shad, and I know that Jordan knows Shad, and Shad Burkles has done the often thankless job of basically doing more filming at these events than probably anybody. I mean, Shad is... we first got to know Shad, I believe, at Cocodona 2022, perhaps, or maybe it was 21, because he was follow filming the runners coming into Flagstaff, and he logged 84 miles that first year on the streets of Flagstaff, following runners in to help. So the people watching could share in that moment with the runners and see their family members and their friends. And that was always one of the coolest things, like the fact that Shad, it meant enough to him that, he could be doing anything out there. He could be doing bike camps. He could, set up whatever he wanted to. He's talented in, the audiovisual arts. And he chooses to get his training in by basically, being a part of, bringing moments to the viewership and to families out there. And so I as much as I'm sad to not have Shad on, our side of the experience at Cocodona this year, as we've always had, I am super stoked to see him experience it. And I can't wait for somebody, perhaps Dr. Stephen Crawford, to be follow filming him on the streets of Flagstaff, take that left on Birch down Cocodona Alley, and have his Cocodona finish moment.
Mine's Robbie Cheney. And my story with Robbie, last year, Robbie works at one of the local sporting goods stores, and I met Robbie in there. He was training for Cocodona. I was training for Cocodona. Every time I'd go in there, we would talk about our training and really got to become friends and just kind of, how's it going? What are you experiencing? And we were both, first year we had done it, so we were both a little terrified and, had that shared experience. So after I finished Cocodona, Saturday morning comes and I check the tracker and Robbie's still out there. Mm-hmm. And so I'm with my family and I'm looking at it and realized he is going to finish, but he was actually one of the final two finishers. So if you remember them coming in together, he was the one wearing the purple pants. And
yeah.
And so
he came back.
Yeah. So he's my family and I get there. I'm, coming off of Cocodona. Everything's a wreck inside your body. Your hormones are all over. You're not in sleep. Your mind's gone. You're just a wreck. And so we go into the coffee shop right across the street, and I walk in, and Robbie's family is there. And they came up, and they were like, "Are you Caleb?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And they're like, "We're Robbie's family." And I immediately, is just this flood of emotions. And I just looked at, his family, and I said, he's going to do it. He's going to finish. And they're like, "We know." And we all started crying. So we're all just standing there crying. And I'm like, this is crazy. And then we went out, and that tunnel formed, that human tunnel, and everybody was clapping, and then he came through. And it was the most beautiful moment, and he's running it again this year, and I just can't wait to cheer him on. And he's such a great guy, and yeah, what a story.
Man, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. Well, I've kind of got a two-parter, so bear with me. But the first part is Chris remembers this well. Last year, we were mesmerized on the live stream as the week unfolded with the story of the Chisholm family. We first learned about Brody Chisholm, who was running in the top 10 as a 17-year-old. We had learned that he came from a family of thru hikers, and they live in New Hampshire, and they had run the Eldon Crest the previous year, and Brody was crushing it. His brother Ben, who's a lot more laid back. Brody's a real kind of type A guy. I forget what his mom said his trail name was, but it's something like Take Chances or. But Ben finished, and then so did Jenny Chisholm, the mom, and we had the whole family in. The whole family, we figured out a way to track them down via the live stream, and we had the whole family come over to the Airbnb and do an interview. And so there was the dad and Jenny and Brody and Ben who had finished, and little brother Elliot. And little brother Elliot was like, definitely, you could tell, third of three boys. I have three boys, and he reminded me a lot of my third son, Tully. Just, you could tell he's like, he had grown up every morning, woke up every morning ready for a fight, like, because he had to get his food, he had to get his stuff, and his older brothers, probably dominated things. And we went around and interviewed them all, and Elliot was like, yeah, I want to run this someday. And I think one of us said, well, what? You want to run the 125? And he was like, no, I want to run the big dog. And Elliot Chisholm, all 15 years old of him, is in the race this year. Jenny's back, Brody's back. Ben is not running, but Elliot, he's in. And I cannot wait. And they have an involved system. Each of the three of them will have their own crew, their own system. The dad kind of oversees the whole thing. But this is going to be year 2 of the Chisholm family, basically, storming Cocodona. And I remember just feeling like, man, this is like the feel-good story of the year. There's always so many feel-good stories at Cocodona, but this was a huge one. And I know as the race receded into our memories, Chris and I, it just felt like, yeah, the story's not done yet. And having Elliot in the race this year is just incredible. I have a part 2 though too, because after the race, and hang on, I gotta crack a brew, because this is Friday afternoon and it's crack a brew with AJW time. But at the end of the race last year, Chris and I closed up shop at the Airbnb, and we rushed down because there's no kind of cooler vibe, especially for us Arizona locals, than the finish line of our big races, whether it's Javelina or Black Canyon, and especially a Crown King, of course, but especially Cocodona, and being in the environment at Heritage Square is really incredible. And we rushed down there and we got there, and we were almost immediately greeted by our good friend Rob Martin. Rob was a stalwart member of the Aravaipa running community, was one of our group leaders in our every Monday and Wednesday group runs. Came from, speaking of through hiking, basically a backpacking background into trail and ultra running. He was a backpacker for a long time. He finally dipped his toe into some Aravaipa races, starting with the 6K and building up to a 10K, and then ultimately, finished in 2024, the Javelina 100K. And we were chatting at the finish line there, and he is also, in addition to all these other things, had been very, very active in the live streams and as a camera guy out in the field or doing whatever was needed. I remember he at Black Canyon in 2024, he spent the entire race holding the laptop for Leah Yingling while Jamil filmed Leah as a field reporter. Just incredible stuff. And so we were, they were breaking up the finish line, and I had to go, and we sort of were in that mode of like, oh man, we don't want to leave. And Rob and I looked at each other and were like, hey man, how about we sign up for Sedona Canyons for next year? And he's like, because you know how it is with Cocodona these days, they fill up so fast, you kind of have to do it right away. And he's like, all right, I'll think about it. And I went home right away. I talked to Shelly. I signed up for Sedona Canyons 125. And about a week later, Rob sent me a screenshot of his ultra sign up entry. So we were both going to run Sedona Canyons. And then Rob had a couple real bad kind of turns in the road, and had a heart attack, and then he had a second more severe heart attack maybe a week or so before Javelina. I know, he was all signed up to volunteer at Javelina and do the live stream, and Chris and I were in touch with him, and even up to a couple days before he was going to do it, but ultimately
we had to tell him to
recover. We had to tell him to not do it. And then a couple days after Javelina, Chris and I went to visit Rob in the hospital. And we chatted with him. He asked all about my Javelina. Was just always that guy who was asking questions about how other people were doing, how Chris's training was going, how my training was going. He was the fun group leader of the Aravaipa runs, and the fun group, in other running groups it might be called the slow group, but it was the fun group. And Rob always made sure that everyone was included and no one got left behind. Well, sadly, about a couple of days after Chris and I visited Rob while he was doing his rehab, he had another heart attack and didn't survive that one and died in early November of 2024 at the age of 54. And as that all of that was sinking in, I started thinking about the sort of deal that Rob and I had to run the Sedona Canyons in 2025, and a good friend of his, Mike Darris, who I had shared a room with at Crown King, and who'd been in touch with Chris and I, and who Chris was one of the presenters and speakers at Rob's memorial service in November of 2024, hatched this idea of having a tribute to Rob at this year's Sedona Canyons Cocodona. And along that way, I decided, after a very brief conversation with my wife, Shelly, that, you only live once, and maybe I should skip the step of running the Sedona Canyons 125 and run all 250 miles, 150 for me and 150 for Rob. And so we got in touch with Steve Adderholt, the race director of Cocodona and all the Cocodona events. And Steve has graciously created special bib numbers for both Mike and me this year for us to wear in the race to run with Rob. And I just got this a couple hours ago when I pulled in, so I want to hold it up here. This is a special bib number in memory of Rob Martin. That I will have one of them, and Mike Darris will have one of them, and we'll be running with Rob from Deep Canyon Ranch to Flagstaff. And I know, for me personally, I'm a little bit scared about this race. I think healthily scared about it, but nothing. I don't think there's anything that is more scary than what Rob had to go through, and so I'm gonna crack a brew right now because that's what I know Rob would want me to do. And for those of you who are going to be cheering along for all of us on this week, throw in a cheer for Rob also.
I do know that a scholarship fund has been set up at his alma mater, and perhaps we'll talk about that during the race and maybe offer up the link to people in the chat so they can perhaps make a donation if they feel so inclined. But
yeah, Rob was a proud alum of the College of William and Mary back in Virginia. He and I talked a lot about higher education and education in general. And his girlfriend Rebecca has worked with the development staff at William and Mary to establish a scholarship fund in Rob's name at the College of William and Mary. And hopefully we'll have a chance to chat about that during the live stream. But thank you. I know that was maybe a little bit of a downer as we're celebrating our human interest stories, but I don't think I don't think this race would be complete without celebrating the memory of Rob as we go into Cocodona Week 2025.
Absolutely. The live stream, of course, the race itself starts at 5 a.m. on Monday. Our coverage is going to start probably about 4:30 that morning, I believe. Is that correct, Jordan? 4:30 start on Monday morning local time. So for those of you here on the West Coast, you're going to have to wake up early. For those of you on the East Coast, maybe you'll have a cup of coffee and be able to, especially if you work from home or get to the office early. And we'll be starting that day. I believe Troy Meadows and I will be opening up the show. Troy and I work together at Javelina, but I want to go through this.
I want to hear what the new guy's doing. Are you going to make them sing songs and the initiation rites, or how? Yeah, run through the lineup, Chris, because this is exciting. It's the live stream of the year.
Absolutely. Of course, Caleb Stevens is going to be anchoring a lot of the coverage. We've got Greg Verhagen, rather. Sorry, coming from Canada. They let him back into the country, and he's going to be helping us out as well. Corinne Shalvoy, a very familiar face to people on these live streams, is going to be a part of the team. Tara Dower is going to be a part of our live stream team. Pete Kostelnik from Flagstaff, of course, world-class runner. Hillary Yang. Let's see, Sierra DeGroff, Air Viper Racing Team member and Mount Coast runner. Pete's meets himself. Pete Mortimer is going to be in studio on Tuesday. We're going to probably see what we can do to get some grub into the studio, so you'll want to stick around for that. Claire Farrow is going to be joining the team as well later on in the week, I believe Wednesday. Patrick Kavanaugh. Patrick Kavanaugh is new to our live streams, but you're going to see more
AKA
of him.
Bubba
Kavanaugh. He's actually going to be joining us on Wednesday, and I know that he's actually going to be, this is kind of like his opportunity to stretch his legs, and because he's going to be helping us out with our High Lonesome broadcast later this year. The trail gangsta himself, Rory Monahan, is going to be joining us on Thursday night, actually on Thursday and Friday. Bronco Billy. Jeff Browning is going to be part of the team. I mean, we've got so many great talents that are going to be joining us here. And, depending on how he's feeling, we've got a space reserved for you coming up on Saturday.
I did see my name on the list, and God willing, if I finish in time, I'd love to jump into the studio, Chris, and share those last few hours with you, because that's a highlight of my year for sure.
So, Caleb, you finished in what, 97 hours, you said?
Yeah. Yep.
Can you beat that?
You know what? I've got my unofficial goal is, happy hour on Friday.
That's
right.
right.
If I could hit a happy hour and finish, hit a happy hour in Flagstaff, grab a shower at Karen and Natu's house, and come back over to the studio. That's what I'd like to do.
Okay. And before we wrap
Which
things
would be
up,
about, by the way, that'd be about 105. I think you probably finished in the morning time of Friday. Yeah.
Before we wrap things up, I do have one more thing I want to do. So You are running this race, and you're moving from the broadcast booth to the field. You finished this race last year, and now you're moving into the broadcast booth. I want each of you to give the other a bit of advice on what they're in for this coming week. So let's start with you, Caleb. Tell AJW what's going on.
You're in for the best, most beautiful journey of your life. You're in for a summation of what life is, all the highs and all the lows. You're in for some incredible food. And it's a week you're never going to forget, and you won't want to. And so I would say even those moments that are the most miserable are the ones that you're going to look back, because there's going to be something really special that happens in that really miserable moment. And it might be somebody else that's there with you. It might be something that you see. It might be a thought that you have or a memory that you have. I don't know what it'll be, but there's going to be something. And you will cherish that miserable moment from here on out. It's going to be amazing, man.
Oh, man, that was really poignant.
That was great.
That was really poignant. That might make a little reel somewhere. As for the live stream, I've come to realize, especially sitting side by side with Chris for so many of these, that doing these really is like running an ultra. That you've got to expect the unexpected.
Yeah.
You've got to be prepared for stuff to happen that just is going to make you have to pivot and problem solve right from the get-go. You're going to lean on other people, especially this guy.
Yeah.
I mean, Chris he is the voice of Cocodona for a reason. And he makes everybody better because of his presence in the studio, even when he's not in the studio. Like, his shadow is part of what makes the Cocodona live stream so special. And I've had countless people tell me this. So lean on Chris. Yeah. And then also put your own stamp on it. Yeah. You know, put your own stamp. You're obviously a very well-spoken guy. You understand the modern world of the sport and everything else. But put your own stamp on it. Find that way where you can explain something that you see or something that you experience, or a lull in the coverage where you have to fill a half an hour. Those are because there's a lot of those. That's a wonderful opportunity to like fill the space with something that then is ultimately satisfying for you. Because you want to, we're ultimately, yes, these live streams are giving to other people, but we wouldn't do them if they weren't also inherently satisfying for us. Yeah. And I think that's a wonderful opportunity for you and for Chris and for Mountain Outpost as this continues to be. I mean, I really think it's a safe bet that this 2025 Cocodona will be the most viewed live stream in the freaking history of live streams.
Yeah, no, that was absolutely fantastic. That turned out better than I could have hoped. Like, that was like one of the best
he comes
segments.
From a background in sports radio. He likes to play games and stuff like that.
No, that was wonderful. Like, I appreciated the fact that Caleb, you were able to convey like basically what the race meant to you, and AJW, you know, giving him advice on what he's in for as well. You know, that's exactly what I hoped for. And frankly, I think that both of you in your flip-flop roles this time around are both going to have a hell of a week this coming week. So.
Can I turn the mic one more time, Chris, and ask you, and this is more of a question, like, as you start this is Friday night, you know, I think you're going to head up to Flagstaff after picking up Liam at the airport, probably tomorrow. How do you gas up for this week?
It's different this year. I will say that in years past, it has been difficult to maintain energy levels. I've had to take some time off. I actually do work my day job, and then I come on at night afterwards. But I feel like this year I've taken a lot better care of myself. Obviously, I've got big plans for myself in the months to come, and I think that that's done me a whole lot of good. I sleep better. I as much as I love my crack and brews with you, I've taken a pause on that. I basically, like, I guess that the byproducts of trying to get myself ready for my own big journey is hopefully going to help me tell the story of everybody else's. Like, that's the one thing that I feel like this year, I feel like I'm not quite as ready on the information and intel side, but I've still got a big weekend, and I'm going to have, like, as you mentioned, I'm picking up Liam, aid station Fireball from the airport. Man, if there's anybody to share a 2-hour car ride to Flagstaff with to talk about a race and get some information on people I don't know about, he's the guy.
Yeah.
So I'll definitely be talking to him, about to fill my gaps in knowledge and information. I'll be working on my own spreadsheets, to get everything ready. But I feel like my preparation for the race this year has been more of a, I guess, I don't know if I'm using this term properly, but it's more of a holistic thing with regards to what I've done for myself in general.
Yeah.
So I think that, I think I'm still going to take an afternoon off somewhere along the way from doing the accounting thing so I can focus on maybe getting a little bit of a nap or maybe some miles out on the course. But I feel like this year, I think, is going to be, be our best effort yet. I mean, we've got a bigger team than ever. Everybody is amped and hyped. Everybody I've spoken to is super excited to be a part of it. Air Vipa After Dark, as we joked about beforehand, Air Vipa After Dark is already booked.
Right.
Like we already have all of our co-hosts
in
in
past
place.
years, you're scrambling at like 4 PM to get someone.
Yeah,
to come
who's
on
coming
at
out with me at
7.
6? Yeah, no. So I think that this year, I think that in a lot of ways, the framework has been a lot stronger than in years past. So that's what I'm looking forward to.
Well, Chris, that is great, and man, this is making me kind of bummed I'm running the race.
It is weird when you cover a race, and you'll learn this over time. I'm assuming that you're gonna be a part of this. You're stuck with us.
Yeah,
but
totally. We even got you the shirt.
Yeah.
But how about the shirts, everybody?
but when you become a part of the live streams, like you're happy to be there, but there's also a part of you that's like, man, I wish I was running. And then when you're running, you're like, man, I wish it was on the live stream.
Yeah.
Because when you're feeling painful, and he's going to experience this weekend for sure, or this next week, like when he's 150 miles in and he's sleep deprived, he's going to think, oh man, I wish he'll come into an aid station.
Well,
where
I'll
it'll be on in the
probably
background.
hear it going. I'll probably hear you talking. I'm like, oh, I could be there.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that it's kind of funny because, that's just human nature that we, no matter what we're doing, if we switch roles, oh, I wish I was doing this. I wish I was doing that. So I think you'll have, you might have some moments of FOMO of being out on the course, but you'll definitely have some moments of FOMO
Of being in the studio.
So, and with that, I think we've covered pretty much every base possible. I mean, we're going to start our coverage at 4:30 in the morning on Monday local time. We are going to go basically wall to wall until Saturday morning, rather, at 10 a.m. is the final cutoff, 125 hours after the start.
We usually go a little after 10 a.m. for
Usually,
people
it depends
to
on,
cry and.
Oh yeah, it depends on how long those last
Depends on,
finishers
yeah,
get.
we usually have a pretty good eye on the last finishers by six or seven.
And I think that's one of the cool things is that like we've had years where it's come down to the final 5 minutes.
Yeah.
We've also had years where we cut out an hour early and then we
Yeah.
ran down to the finish
Exactly.
line to hang out. So it's one thing that we'll get to do. I want to thank our sponsors too as well. I mean, without them, none of this would be possible. I mean, we talk, and you're dead on about this being probably the most viewed live stream ultra marathon in history coming up this weekend. I mean, this coming week. I mean, I would be shocked if it weren't hundreds of thousands of views when all is said and done.
Yeah.
But Speedland, John G is going to be outfitting us here this week. Knack, Ultra Spire, Tailwind, Catula, Squirrels Nut Butter, and Satisfy. Of course, Satisfy is going to be out at that Fain Ranch aid station. But I guess before we close, we'll give them a sponsor shout out. And you're going to be out there for the to reap the benefits. What's that Satisfy aid station really like for the runners?
Almost too comfortable. It's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. You come in, there's a couch, there's great food. They had all sorts of cool stuff. It was the nicest porta potty I'd also ever seen. It was this like almost like a trailer porta potty. It was amazing. I could have sat in there all day. It was nice and cool. Yeah, that was a wonderful aid station.
Yeah, and my thinking is if I'm not that sleepy at Whiskey Row, I'm just going to keep going so I can get to that one, and I might do my sleep there.
That actually might be a great idea. Yeah. So I guess with that, we look forward to you joining us for 125 hours of Cocodona coverage starting Monday morning at 4:30 local time. For Andy Jones-Wilkins, Caleb Stevens, I'm Chris Warden, and we'll see you soon.
Cheers, everybody.
Bye, everybody.